Now, if you just joined us, this is a 60-minute session, Institute of Internal Auditors, The Power to Move Mountains, presented by Wan Chun Loh. As a way of introduction, the Singapore Accountancy Commission serves to develop and nurture the accountancy sector and transforming Singapore into the global accountancy hub. As the Chief Executive, Wan Chun leads the SAC in collaborating with local and international communities to promote accountancy talent development, develop professional accountancy services, research and thought leadership. Always having a passion for teaching, Wan Chun is an adjunct associate professor with the NUS Business School, where he teaches enterprise risk management and social media sentiments. As an advocate of continuing education, Wan Chun serves as a member of the Institute of Technical Education's Business Services Academic Advisory Committee. Wan Chun volunteers as the Intermediate Past President of the Institute of Internal Auditors in Singapore, on the Management Committee of the Securities Investors Association Singapore, as the Honorary Secretary, and as a District Councillor of the Central Singapore CDC. Wan Chun, I'm about to open up your mic. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Michael. Thanks very much for the introduction.
There we are. I've passed control to you. Enjoy the session, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for taking your lunchtime to attend this session. I will try to complete within the 60 minutes, and I'll just quickly jump right into it. And if any of you have questions, please do send me a message on the website. The opening photo that you see there is a summit photo that's taken at the summit of Mount Rinjani, which is on the island of Lombok. Just for reference, Lombok is just across the waters from the island of Bali, so it's not too far away from Australia. Mount Rinjani is a live volcano with just under 4,000 meters, and for many of you who don't climb, you probably have no idea as to how high is 4,000 meters. Looking at the picture, you think that it's pretty high. If you take a plane and go on a holiday, and when the plane gets to cruising altitude, when the pilot says, you may take off your seatbelt now and you may walk around, that's about 8,000 meters. So Mount Rinjani is just about halfway there. And also 8,000 meters or 8,800 meters is the height of Mount Everest. So Rinjani is half of that of Mount Everest. I see some stuff here that says you don't have video, audio. Michael, should I continue with this?
Absolutely. There's only one or two that are having audio issues, and I've just popped in a message to get people to dial into the session. So please continue. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Yeah, so coming back to heights and mountain, 4,000 meters not a very high mountain compared to, say, Mount Everest. But let me start the session proper by saying that people who climb mountains, people who climb corporate ladders, people who want to go up to be CEOs, people who want to achieve great things, sales targets, etc. Somehow, the kind of motivation that they get into sort of messes with their views on ethics. Mountain climbers, of course, like to reach the peak, but at what cost? And that's really the genesis or the core of today's topic is to what would you do in order to reach the summit? What will you give up? If I go on to the next slide, the session synopsis. The Parable of the Sadhu is a really, really good article. The article is published in the Harvard Business Review, even though it's pretty old, back in 1983. But it is a really good article to read, to really truly understand the concept of ethics and what people give up in terms of ethics when they climb mountains. So coming to the synopsis again, the Parable of the Sadhu is really about, it's a real story, unlike some other parables or tales. It's about two adventurers, and these were two Americans, and they were climbing a mountain in the Himalayas. And this mountain is over 4,000 meters, so it's pretty high. And they literally spent 6 years in planning to climb the mountain. So you think about it, many of us spend many years in climbing the corporate mountains, and when you're almost there, just like the mountaineers, when you're almost reaching a peak after spending so much time, what will you do in order to reach the summit? What will you give up? So here, the parable of sadhu is that these two mountaineers came across a sadhu, which is a Indian holy man, while they were on the way to the summit, to the peak of the mountain they were climbing. And then at the point of meeting the sadhu, they had to make a tough decision. Do I help the sadhu or do I not help the sadhu? And the parallel comparison is that when you're climbing up the corporate ladder, when you're facing tough situations at work, what would you do? So at the end of this session, the key question that we all ask ourselves should be that, have we met our sadhu? If we have not met our sadhu, then we will not have experienced what it's like to have an ethical dilemma, which is the other key learning point based on today's session. So with that as a broad introduction, a broad background as to climbing mountains, how high is high, and a bit about the parable of the sadhu, let me just jump right into it again. The two Americans in the parable of the sadhu, they met that dilemma at 4,700 meters. So this is about half the height of Mount Everest, pretty high up there. At 4,700 meters, the two Americans encountered a sadhu. And the sadhu was poorly dressed, half naked. At 4,700, it was cold, it was miserable, there was lots of snow. And the Americans were not alone in their hike up the summit. There were a couple other teams there. There were a New Zealand team, the Swiss team, and a Japanese team who were also on the way up the summit. And they all met the sadhu. And they all tried to do something for the sadhu who was shivering in the cold. So the Americans and the Swiss provided warm clothes for the sadhu. The Kiwis carried the sadhu down to a certain level. The Japanese team gave the sadhu some food. But as you read the story, the climbers were also intent on reaching the summit. You see, in climbing, there's always a small window for reaching the summit. Either it gets too dangerous, it gets too cold, you get too tired. Once you miss that window, you have to descend and you won't reach the summit. So imagine in this scenario, the Americans spent 6 years in training to reach the summit. And I'm not sure how much time the Kiwis, the Swiss and Japanese spend in terms of training, but let me show you, it's not easy to train to climb mountains. So it's a lot of time, a lot of effort. The long and the short of it is that in the parable, the conclusion was that no one was willing to take the sadhu all the way down to the village where you can be 100% sure that the sadhu was safe, taken care of, and he will live. They all did the small parts for the sadhu. Some gave some food, some carried, some gave clothes, but no one took full responsibility for the sadhu. No, after they reached the summit, the author of the article, Parable of Sadhu, one of the Americans, asked this very difficult question. Did the sadhu live? And up to today, he could not answer that question. They reached the summit, the two Americans. But the more important question was, did the sadhu survive the cold? And nobody could answer that question. So here, if you compare to what we have in the working world, and we've seen that in many cases as internal auditors, when we review operations, when we review processes, when we're also bent on reaching the summit, climbing the corporate ladders, achieving sales targets, meeting KPIs, how much have people willing to compromise in order to hit the targets? And if you look at the next slide here, this is very common dilemma at work, a corollary, similar to meeting a sadhu at 4,700 meters. So here you have a scenario that if you have access to confidential information, and whether internal auditor or otherwise, many of us have access to confidential information in the company. And if we know that the company is planning to file for liquidation, and we also know that a close relative has his life savings invested in this company, and the key question is that, what will you do if you have such information? You disclose and save the relative, and at the same time you will breach a confidentiality clause within your employment contract. So dilemmas are very common, whether at the mountain or at work. Dilemmas are common for whatever roles that we play in, whether we're internal auditors or not. So once again, with that as a broad background, climbing mountains, facing dilemmas, I will now go into two very close topics. One is called ethics, and the other one is called morals. Both are talking about what is right, what is wrong, but their starting point is just slightly different. And once we completed that, then we can jump into what we call ethical dilemmas. Ethics, as opposed to morals. Ethics is all about right or wrong. Ethics are man-made. Ethics are rules that are developed by people, by companies, by groups, by cultural groups, by professional groups, to dictate behavior. So you should not disclose confidential information. We shall do things in this way, or shall do things in that way. Thanks, Michael, for showing the link to the Code of Ethics for the Institute of Internal Auditors. So ethics are very common amongst professional bodies, CPAs, CAs, internal auditors. These are rules, and once again, these are man-made. So whether internally to yourself, whether you believe in these rules or not, the point is that these rules are imposed upon you if you belong to a certain group. And whether you believe in these rules or not, and whether they're in alignment with what you believe in, that's the next thing where we talk about morals. So ethics compared to morals. Morals are similar to ethics in the sense that they're talking about what is right, what is wrong. But morals are more internal to the individual. These are your values. These are your ideals. For example, in ethics and rules, you would not have an ethical rule that says do not gossip, have courage. Of course, you have ethical rules on do not cheat, be trustworthy, but you will not have very specific rules on keeping your promises, do not judge, do not be envious of your neighbor. So morals are a bit on the softer side. They're not so specific, much broader. And once again, as a result, there are more principles rather than specific rules, habits, if you may. But both ethics and morals have to do with what is right and what is wrong. And therein lies the challenge. What is right and what is wrong? The rules may say this, the ethics rules may say this, but morally you may disagree with it. So then you have a situation where you have this thing called an ethical dilemma. And so this on page 8 talk about this, ethics versus morals. Those are about what is right and what is wrong. Ethics are a series of rules. Morals are values, principles, and very much internalized within an individual. And then there is where the similarity stops when you talk about what is right, what is wrong. Dilemmas come about when there is a different view as to what is right, what is wrong. And a commonly repeated example is about a situation where you have a hungry child, and ethically is, or always wrong to steal, and ethically it's always wrong to let the child starve. But is it all right to steal in order to not let the child starve? So here you have a scenario where you're forced to commit one wrong in order to avoid committing another wrong. So ethical dilemmas are very common, and as internal auditors, it is something that when you do your review, it is something that people are stuck with. The next slide, I just quickly show a video as to how to demonstrate ethical dilemmas. And the trolley problem, in fact, is a very commonly used example to demonstrate ethical dilemmas and how, whether it's at 4,700 meters, whether it incorporates or not, we face this situation of ethical dilemmas. Should I or should I not steal the loaf of bread? Should I or should not help the child? Should I or should not help the sadhu? So if Michael can play the video. It's a short video. The resolution is not that great, but let's have a quick watch.
So I'm about to play the video now. It's just uploading. And here we go. One turn, you won't have any sound at this stage, so don't worry about that.
Thanks, Michael.
Love that video. I think it's great. Thanks for that. One turn, I'm just going to pass control back to you. And I'm going to open up your mic there. There we go. It's back in your control. Up to date. Back onto presentation. There we are. If you just click on presentation there. Thanks a lot.
Yep, got it. Thanks, Michael. I hope you enjoyed that video. It's kind of funny. But the trolley problem, even though it's been around for many, many years, really illustrates the kind of dilemmas that we are in. You know, as internal auditors, we really truly need to understand how people behave, whether they're at 4,700 meters, whether they're facing a starving child, whether they're facing a trolley problem where you have one person on the track, or the 5% on the track. And there are many variations of the trolley problem. What if that one person is your friend? What if the 5% are total strangers? Would that make a difference? What if that one person is your mother-in-law? People always laugh at that. Would that make a difference as to how you pull the trolley? And we, as internal auditors, we don't spend enough time understanding how people would react to situations when they're faced with ethical dilemmas, because they will make decisions, and those decisions are sometimes really weird decisions, like the parable of the sadhu, where when they make those decisions, is it right? Is it really wrong? And as internal auditors, we always look at what is right, what is wrong, and sometimes when things become gray, how do you audit? Is it really a finding? So as we go into the gray area, the more that we know about how people behave, how people react to ethical dilemmas and ethical situations, the better we are able to understand why certain decisions were made, and then how to craft our recommendations. So black and white is easy. Ethical dilemmas in the gray zone are infinitely very, very difficult. But I truly believe that the more that we are able to grasp this difficult area, the better we are able to craft our recommendation, and also really to face these things head on and not to sweep them under the carpet. Current issue that comes up quite often is the ethical dilemma of social media. Many of us who use social media, like for example Facebook, when somebody sends you a friend request, do you click accept? If it's a friend, kind of friend, social friend, yeah, it's fine. But what if that person is a vendor, a competitor? What would you do? So as you look at the corporate world, social media has encroached on the borders between what is corporate and what is not. So as internal auditors, your scope is infinitely much bigger than what it used to be in the past. So you can't just review controls within the organization, but now controls external to the organization are just as important. A side issue here is really combined assurance is a hot topic, but that's a topic for another day. Combined assurance, but seriously, Facebook is potentially a lot of areas to look at just within social media, within Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the kind of control issues that can come up. So here, Facebook is easy. If you receive an invitation from a vendor and you are conducting currently a tender for which this vendor is involved in, obviously you wouldn't want to accept that invitation. But there are certain social media platforms where you don't have a choice, where you are automatically added to a group or to a community where you don't need to be invited. I'm sure many of you use WhatsApp. If a vendor adds your name to a WhatsApp group, uses your mobile number and adds you to a WhatsApp group, you can't stop the vendor. So unlike Facebook, where you have to actively accept it, in WhatsApp you can't. You're automatically in the group. Of course, you can withdraw from the group subsequently once you're included in the group. But what if in the interim period where you're still in the group and you don't realize it, and in that group chat they discuss something, and by virtue that you're being part of that group, you are complicit in the decisions that were made in that group, and someone takes a screenshot, and screenshots are really nasty nowadays, right? I mean, you can delete stuff, but the moment somebody does a screenshot of a conversation in the WhatsApp chat group, you're caught. So how do you deal with situations like that where there are dilemmas? So social media dilemmas is a brand new area, and I've not seen internal auditors really focusing on this area well. So if I were you, this will be an area that I'll seriously want to put some resources on. The challenge is that there are no borders on social media. You don't know where it ends, you don't know where it begins. So the scope of it is going to be kind of difficult. So let's leave social media dilemma now. So if I can just summarize the first part of my presentation, where I spoke about mountain climbing, and when you spend a lot of time preparing to climb a mountain, and when you're almost reaching the summit, you will make decisions that may or may not be right, depending on what is right, what is wrong. and when you face ethical dilemmas. And if you compare that to the corporate world, when people have KPIs, so when we audit KPIs, and we audit sales targets, and we audit performance, seldom do we look out for ethical dilemmas. And so by understanding ethical dilemmas, we're able to then really do a deep dive into why people make certain decisions, whether they do enough, they leave behind the sadhu. But this is an area that I think is right for internal auditors to go into. So with that as the first part, let me now go into the second part of my presentation. Is really then how do we help people within the organization deal with ethical dilemmas? Being faced with it and having no safeguard is put them in very difficult situation. And when they have no safeguards, they may or may not make the right decision. And when they make the wrong decision at the point in time, it may not be wrong, but subsequently, if they're subjected to an audit, then it may be perceived as wrong. So how do we have a safeguard for ethical dilemma situations based on what we've seen in the first part of the presentation? There are just 6 points here, and these safeguards are really to address ethical dilemmas. The first bullet point is that you should audit and see that there are an ability for people to inform higher level of management. Is there a formal channel that anybody within the organization, depending on which hierarchy he or she sits in, that they're able to inform higher levels of management, his or her boss, to say that I'm now facing an ethical dilemma. If you don't have a ability, you don't have a channel for the individual to be able to inform higher level of management, then what happens is that you have one less route for this individual to get someone to second guess his decision. Should I leave behind the sadhu or not? Should I steal the loaf of bread or not? Should I disclose this confidential information or not? When you don't have a safeguard on the first bullet point, this person will be left alone. And when you're left alone, the decision that you make will depend on your morals, which is really your principles and your own internal design, your own internal behavior. The rules, the ethics, the rules may say one thing, but if you face a dilemma because morally you either believe or don't believe in it, once again, you will hit an ethical dilemma. And for all the rules that companies put into place, the rules of ethics, rules of behavior, when you are faced with an ethical dilemma because it conflicts with your morals, people will be caught and they may or may not make the right decision. So first and foremost, have a proper channel for people to escalate information upwards. Someone will probably say, yeah, it's a bit easier than said than done. And we'll talk about it in the next slide. We'll talk about culture, where you have a culture, if people shoot the messenger, then how can you even inform higher levels of management? When you have a culture of nothing can be wrong, how can you even have a ability to inform higher levels of management? So once again, these are gray areas for internal auditors to look at when it comes to ethical dilemmas. Those charged with governance, TCWG, this is a commonly used acronym within organizations. When an individual is faced with ethical dilemma, allow that person to be able to inform those charged with governance. So who are those charged with governance? Well, very simply, the head of internal audit, the audit committee chairman, independent directors, maybe the chief risk officer, people who are a little bit more perceived as being independent. So people who are too closely linked to sales targets, KPIs, performance measures, those I would believe have less to do with governance in the sense that they're a little bit more conflicted. as opposed to those who are have a more independent, perceived to be more independent. So actually, internal auditors, we play quite an important role as ability to be able to help people who face ethical dilemmas. The second bullet point, some would compare this to a whistleblowing line, where many internal auditors hold the whistleblowing line. So whistleblowing line is not just for people to call up and say they saw a fraud being committed or they suspect a fraud being committed, but really allowing people to say that, you know, the decision made by this person or that person doesn't seem to be right, or maybe a bit suspect. Would you want to look at it? At the same time, also allow people who face ethical dilemmas where ethics conflicts with the morals, allow those people to be able to speak to you if you are indeed the one charged with governance. So that's the second part, second bullet point. The third bullet point is really to have a register. So have some kind of ability for people to disclose, not to individual people, not to the management, not to those charged with governance, but really have a logbook of sorts for people to disclose. This could be anonymous, or it may not be anonymous, not necessarily. But if it's anonymous, then of course there are corresponding issues. But assuming that it's anonymous, having a register allow people to vent off steam, allow people to then able to lock down, to register how they feel about certain things. And if it's anonymous, of course, you got to take it with a pinch of salt. But at least there's a channel for people who face ethical dilemmas before they make that wrong decision, and wrong depending on who sees it. Allow them to lock down and register their concerns as and when they face ethical dilemmas. Fourthly, have clear policies and guidelines. You may think that this is a no-brainer, but really, this is really a low-hanging fruit. And having clear policies and guidelines really give people a lot of comfort. And I see that to be very useful. So this is a very low-cost investment in making sure that the basic ethical dilemmas are dealt with, but probably not the complex ones. But once again, at least you deal with the low-hanging fruit. So clear policies, clear examples on what are potential ethical dilemmas that specifically your organization will face based on your unique situations. Different industries have different situations, but give clear examples and have clear policies and guidelines. The fifth bullet point is probably related to the first and second one, whistleblowing. And whistleblowing has been commonly used in many organizations for fraud. But I think less so for situations of ethical dilemmas where people use the line to report something that they personally feel comfortable with and cannot make a decision. I think traditionally whistleblowing has been associated with fraud, stealing, or things which are control failures. But ethical dilemmas are not control failures until a wrong decision is made, and wrong depending on who sees it. So I would want to suggest that for those of you who have a whistleblowing line, perhaps to expand it and let people know that they can also call this number when they face ethical dilemmas. And then the last point is mentoring. I find mentoring to be a very useful situation where you have a peer, a buddy, and somebody who is on par with you and not a higher up, or those charged with governance, where you feel comfortable speaking to someone. So having a formalized mentoring framework in place do help in dealing with ethical dilemmas. So before things go wrong, or at that point in time when the person thinks that it's the right thing to do, but subsequently they have a concern as to whether what they did was right or wrong. Just like the parable of the sadhu. At that point in time, the Americans, the Swiss, the Japanese, the Kiwis, they did what they did to help the sadhu. So at that point in time, they thought that it was right. But the moment they reach a summit, they will start asking themselves, did I do the right thing? So before people start questioning, before they face an ethical dilemma, or when they are just about to face an ethical dilemma, these 6 points would be very useful safeguards. And as internal auditors, I would recommend that you audit the presence of such safeguards and whether they're effective or not. Ethical dilemmas are I would say, time bombs. Sooner or later, when the wrong decision is made, or over a period of time, the thing is allowed to fester and the bomb goes off, things will get nasty. So take a look at the safeguards as part of your internal audit scope. I know it's not easy. It's a very gray area, but certainly in today's world where there's key focus on KPIs and performance and targets and always a race to the top, doing right doesn't mean that it's not wrong. And this is really a dilemma in itself. The next slide that I wanted to show you is that it's really for the 6 areas of safeguards, the need to understand culture cannot be underestimated, culture and behavior. If the organization have a culture of shooting the messenger, if the organization have a no bad news culture, and we've all seen this before, where nobody wants to be the messenger because the messenger gets shot. Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news because the boss doesn't like it. And all these are things that conspire to disallow people, to stop people, to disincentivize people from reaching out to share dilemmas that they face. And there's nothing worse than for people to be caught in a situation where these things fester in themselves. They get uncomfortable, productivity goes down, they get very depressed, and of course, in the worst case scenario, they'll quit. And that's bad for the organization. It's not easy to deal with culture of shooting the messenger, culture of no bad news. We just need to be aware of such culture while looking at the 6 areas of safeguards which are useful for dealing with ethical dilemmas. Deference to authority. This is, in fact, a big presentation by itself, deference to authority. If you look at Korean Airlines KL801, this was a real case where a Korean airline was about to land on an island. And the plane was landing in a bad weather situation, and the co-pilot knew that the plane was about to crash because it was coming in too steep and too fast. But he did not tell the pilot because he deferred to authority, because he felt that the pilot was the one in charge, and if he thinks that going in this way is correct, then who am I to question him? Unfortunately, the pilot was wrong, the captain was wrong, and the co-pilot was right. But just before he was about to crash, the co-pilot informed the captain that what he did was, he believed was wrong, but by then it was too late. The Stanford prison experiment, you can Google this. This experiment was done quite a few years ago, but it was a scenario where the professor at Stanford got 2 groups of students. One students pretended to be prisoners, and the other group of students were pretending to be wardens or the prison guards. And they were put into a basement of a building in Stanford, and to play out their roles as both prisoners and as wardens. And in this scenario, the experiment was stopped halfway because the warden started, the so-called warden started to abuse the prisoners, and the prisoners started to feel depressed and really started to feel like prisoners. So the experiment showed that based on whatever role that we play, we just sometimes play it way too well. And once you have this authoritative role, we play it way beyond expectation, as the experiment showed. And those who were subservient, the prisoners, had to defer to authority. So these 3 bullet points here: the culture of shooting the messenger, the culture of not accepting bad news, and the culture of deference to authority, all work against the 6 safeguards that I spoke about in the previous slide. So these two slides in combination makes it a very difficult job for the internal auditors to audit ethical dilemma safeguards, ethical safeguards. So you may have the rules of ethics in place. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not cheat. But ethical rules in every organization will, in many situations, be in conflict with your morals, with what you believe in, with your principles, and with sales targets and with performance measures. So you put them all into pot. It makes it a very difficult situation day to day for many staff in organizations. So the safeguards help to ease the tension felt by individuals when they are faced with ethical dilemmas. But on page 14, we're just going to be cognizant of the fact that it's not an easy thing to deal with. All these things, once again, conspire to go against us.
Wan-Chun, did you see that question or comment from Anne Chu? It's in the chat box.
Yes, thanks, Michael. Just PM, let me do it. So Anne, there's no absolute correct decision when choosing for the greater good. It's more a matter of having a safeguard and escalation in place to register the thought process in arriving at where the decision is made. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. And when it comes to ethical dilemmas, who is more right, if just grammatically correct, who is more right, who is more wrong? It depends on your principles and your morals. What were you brought up to think? What were you brought up to behave? So different people will have different reaction to the rules. So when the boss, when the CEO says that, can't you see the rules are clear? The ethical rules are so clear that can't you read it? We all can read the rules. It's just that if you see the trolley problem because of our own innate behavior, our own innate principles, our own morals, the way that we interpret the rules are different. So there's no absolute right decision. So and you're correct. There's no absolute correct decision as to which is right or more right, which is wrong or more wrong. It's all relative because it's subjective. It's subjective from the morals point of view. It is objective from the ethics, the rules point of view. But these two will clash, as we see. It's super clash. So having this safe safeguards, register or escalation process in place really helps us to let off some steam. May not solve the problem completely because the dilemmas will still be there. And you can argue and argue, but the dilemma will be there. But having the ability to let off steam through these 6 safeguards, I've seen really helps a lot. And I've done this presentation many times. And for these 6 safeguards, most people in the participants will agree, yeah, it's the right thing to do. But if you pair that with the culture issue on page 14, then that kind of makes it very difficult. So and you're correct. At the same time, I know it can be very frustrating where it's not an easy situation to deal with. So thanks for that, and good remark, good question. So that really brings me to the end of my presentation. The last slide that you see here, this is at the peak of Mount Kinabalu. Mount Kinabalu is higher than Mount Rinjani. Rinjani is just under 4,000 meters, and Mount Kinabalu in the state of Sabah is above 4,000 meters. Higher peak doesn't mean that it's more difficult. So the corollary is that in the ethical world, the higher it is, doesn't mean that you face more difficult situations. People will have small mountains to climb in their workplace, and they will still face big dilemmas. So what I would like to conclude with is that use the parable of the sadhu, and like I say, it's a very excellent article that's written back in 1983, Harvard Business Review. Use the article to share within your organization and conduct workshops and ask the people what would they do if they were if you were the climber. What would you do for the sadhu? Would you just do enough so that you feel good, or would you go all the way and bring the sadhu back all the way down to base camp? So with that, I think we've got about 10 more minutes before we end the session, and I'll be happy to take questions from the participants.
At this point, guys, feel free to pop in questions into the chat box. It'd be great to have you perhaps pose a few questions, and some have already started coming through. Thanks for that.
Yeah, we got a question. What's the difference between ethics and values? Can just bring up the slide here. So on page 8, ethics and morals. So morals are really values. Values are within. So how moral you are really depends on what values you believe in, what the principles you believe in. So values are internalized. Ethics are rules. They're external. Values are internal. Both ethics and values are about what is right, what is wrong, and when they conflict, you have ethical dilemmas. I hope that answers your question. Got a question from Richard. How often do you have to check whether safeguards are present in an organization? If you can do it once in a lifetime, I think that'll be excellent. It is so difficult to look at these safeguards because of the cultural barriers. Just a word of warning: you will be bruised. You will be bruised indeed if you go and do an audit of safeguards, because that by itself is full of landmines, because it's so subjective and it's difficult. So I would say, if you do it once and then maybe every few years update these safeguards, I think that'll be good. These safeguards are very strong institutional elements, very difficult to put into place and very difficult for them to be effective. So when you audit them and you're happy with them, they will not change. Just like cultural behavior, an organization's culture. You know, if you read the research, an organization's behavior, culture stays even if the people within the organization leaves. When the CEO quits, when the board changes, when the management change, when the staff change, the culture continues. It's just amazing. And culture is very strongly linked to morals, to values, and linked to ethics, and it conspires to work with or work against the safeguards. So I hope that Richard Chan, that answers your question. So how frequent do we look at the safeguards? I'll say do it once, do it well. I think that will last a long time. I've got a question from Gina saying that what if organizations' culture of bad ethics and morals are very prevalent in an organization? Let me just dissect that a little bit, Gina. I wouldn't think that they're bad ethics, because ethics are really rules, external rules, and most ethical rules are quite vanilla in the sense that they're very common. They are very template-ish. Template, very specific standards. If you look at all the ethics, whether it's the IIA or the CPAs or the CAs or any professional organization, look at the lawyers, ethics are quite generic, and most of the time they'll tell you to do good things. But the behavior, the morals within the behavior, the principles of an organization, the individuals who have different views of what is right because of their morals, and those, some can be bad and some can be good. The organization culture, if the culture is wrong, then even though you have some outstanding morals in terms of principles and values, those culture will work against you. So it's really the organization that's challenging. So Gina, to answer your question, what if you have a bad culture? What if the people have a moral issue? A bit difficult to answer that. I think the tone at the top, I would recommend, will be the first thing to deal with that. If you look at the governance, if the tone at the top is not correct, I would say everything else follows. So like they say, that the rod begins at the head. I hope that answers your question, Gina. We've got a question from Octay. From your experience, do you think family-owned business, family-owned run bigger businesses place more emphasis on morals versus listed companies, being more ethics and statements? I think family-owned, family-run businesses, or compared to, let me see, compared to listed companies, there are some family-run businesses that are professionalized, so they have very clear ethical rules in place, so that's all right. But I would say that family-run businesses have may have a stronger culture in place because they are kind of tightly held, and the founder are still there. So not just family-owned or family-run, but I think where you have the founder / CEO, the entrepreneur, a bunch of people who were there to create the company in the first place. I think those who have a stronger culture, and that will have a bigger effect on the morals and values of the organization, as opposed to listed companies. I think listed companies, by and large, are a bit more less dependent on individuals. So I hope that answers your question, Octay. Stephen Anakin, just a comment that ASX requires a code of conduct, and some regulators have. So that's good. I think, Stephen, we definitely should audit against the requirements of the code of conduct and also the whistleblower requirements. Most codes have that. Most codes of corporate governance have a code of conduct, ethical rules. So code of conduct is an ethical rule, and also there are whistleblower requirements. So these are safeguards within the 6 areas of safeguards that I've shared with the participants. So absolutely, Stephen, Anakin. The question from Richard: for social media dilemma, good social media policy. It helps. Good comment. I mean, having a good guidance on social media policy helps. I think not just connecting with friends or vendors, but really what should you, as an individual, what are you allowed to post on Facebook, on LinkedIn? What are you allowed to post on Instagram? I think specific examples and guidelines are useful because social media is kind of a very big area. So having specific examples for specific platforms will give very specific guidelines to the individuals within the organization. Good comment, Richard. Thank you. Yeah, I agree, Gina. Companies do have guidelines on social media. They do have a code of conduct, ethical rules. Maybe just a poll of the participants. Has anybody done a social media audit before to check how closely the staff link to the guidelines? So we got a yes from Richard Chan. It's a hot potato area, let me tell you. If you audit social media, and from Gina, you said yes under HR policy, I think that's good. But Matt Fitzgerald said plan. I think that's excellent. I would plan it very carefully in terms of the scope. what is your objective. If your objective is to benchmark against your own code of conduct or your own rules as to what is social media, I think that's a simple one, but I think we will audit for ethical dilemmas. I think that's going to be difficult. So Raj Pandey saying that hot potato and nothing came out of it. And from Richard, it's a good project to include an audit plan. Yeah. Gina saying that IT policy, I think I wouldn't characterize social media as a IT thing. It's really a behavior, a cultural thing. Mohan saying that he's done one before. So it seems like there'll be more no's than yes, just based on a quick poll that we've seen. But I would really encourage you to do a small baby step. First of all, check whether your corporate have a social media policy. That's number one. Don't even do a audit against the policy. Do you have a policy that is effective? And then the next step is that audit against that policy, audit against that code of conduct. And as when you audit it against the code of conduct, you will discover ethical situations. Because your rules won't be clear. Let's say somebody posts something on YouTube and posts him or herself doing something on YouTube using a competitor product. Is that all right? I mean, so your rules may say that it's okay to post as long as it's done in good taste. So you follow the rules, you follow the code of ethics. But when you post something, let's say you work for a lawnmower company A, but you post a YouTube using lawnmower company B, which is a competitor. Is that all right? And what do you do when you have these kind of findings? Does it comply with the code? Is it morally correct that you support the competitor? So we've got some comments from Max Alves. Social media in the digital space will certainly constitute for policy and audit within big organizations. Definitely. I think whether big or small, social media is an important area to audit. And every single company, whether it's family-owned, state-owned, or publicly listed, I think social media is here to stay, and we just can't get away with it. Yeah, so Raj Pandey is saying that management cannot always enforce. It's very difficult to enforce. From Richard Chan, comms and media, you're right in the sense that comms and media handle social media within the organization, but because social media is so pervasive, I think management probably should take a view on this. And from Richard again, IT usually talk about social media and using company laptop. You know, the world is mobile right now, Richard. And mobile is an individual. So, do you use your mobile within the organization? It's a personal device. Am I allowed to post something? Am I only allowed to do it during lunchtime? And that's tough. Thanks, Julie, for your comments and remarks. Appreciate that. Thanks, Chris. Right, thanks everybody. It's just 1 minute past 12:30. Thank you very much for your time, and hope you find useful. I've asked Michael to make this to make this available, and I'm not sure if it's Michael or IIA who can make this available to all the participants. Please feel free to use all the stuff in the end there. You're going to learn more about the climbing, and I've got this personal blog that I just set up this year, Basecamp.cafe. I've got some neat little stories about dilemmas, about issues, behavior. That's all linked to corporate, but with a mountain climbing flavor. So have a look at it, and do feel free to share the slides.
Once Hi, Wanchun. Where's that link to all the references to mountain climbing? And you said you were just saying this just now.
Oh, I just posted it. It's called basecamp.cafe.
Oh, basecamp.cafe. So let me just pop that in. Is it www?
Just basecamp.cafe is fine.
Oh, it's fine. Basecamp.cafe. There you go. Is that the link there? Basecamp.cafe? Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So what I do is I do almost daily posts on this to guide people.
Excellent. Excellent. Wanchun, thank you very much.
Michael, you can just send out the slides. Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thanks for that. Thanks, Wanchun, and thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks for those questions at the very end. That was great. It's great when we get to make these sessions as interactive and participatory as possible. So thanks for popping in those questions. Thanks for all those thanks that are coming through as well, guys. Don't forget there is a feedback form that pops open at the end of the session. Please do take the time to fill that in. Great feedback for the Institute of Internal Auditors and great feedback for Wanchun as well. Look forward to seeing you in future sessions. Do keep your eyes open for the monthly sessions that do come up for the Institute of Internal Auditors. We'd love to see you in every single one of them. Till then, enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy the rest of the month, and we will see you next time. Thanks a lot.